So, when it comes to the wide world of gaming and its many, many titles, I like to think that every gamer out there has a series that means something special to them. That series, even if you see its faults more with age, or even ended up growing out of the series and moving on to greener pastures, still brings a smile to your face and warms your heart as you think back on all of the fond memories you had with it. For some, it's probably like Pokemon, or maybe it's something like Mario. For others, it could be Halo, or possibly Fallout. But for me, no other series speaks to me that way like Kingdom Hearts does. I remember the day me and my family got a PS2, and Kingdom Hearts 1 being the first game I got on it. Funny considering that I learned a day later the sequel was coming out in like 3 months or so, and the second I got it, I was completely hooked. Wandering Disney World to Disney World, fighting the Heartless and their Legion of Doom Disney entourage, the power of hearts, friendship, these lovable characters, and everything else that just makes a big dumb smile grow on my face whenever I stop and think about it. I was addicted like an addict, which only got worse once Chain of Memories and 2 came out, and especially 2, which became one of my top 3 games of all time. But despite my and many others' intense love for the series, it's funny to think back on the creation of this series being a thing of pure happenstance. And for this video, I wanted to do a fun little dive into the birth of one of gaming's most legendary franchises, how it was made, and how the hell it even got thought up of as an idea in the first place. I'm Crimson Rosso, and welcome to the story of Kingdom Hearts, the rise of a gaming icon. So, to kick things off, let's get into just how the hell this series even came to be in the first place. After all, one doesn't just wake up one day with a specific idea for a franchise mixing things like Square Enix and Disney in mind. So, how exactly did the idea even come to be? Did they binge all the Final Fantasy games out at the moment and decide to make something brand new? Did they watch a Disney movie and say to themselves, man, that would be a lot cooler if Cloud was here? Did they get super fucking drunk and just decide, hey, let's fuse these series together? Well, what if I told you this all started because of Mario 64? Yahoo! Yeah, I'm not even joking. This is all real. Basically, the idea behind it all was that Hibanori Sakaguchi, the creator of the Final Fantasy series, and Shinji Hashimoto, the man who would go on to becoming the series Kingdom Hearts' co-creator, were planning to make a game that utilizes the same kind of three-dimensional movement that Mario 64 did. But they were running into a problem. They couldn't think of a character that could match Mario in pure popularity, which upon a first thought seems like a goofy thing to get discouraged over, but when you think about it from a business perspective, it makes sense they were hesitant. After all, Square wasn't exactly the platformer guys, and even if they used something like a Moogle or a Chocobo, nothing really could have compared to the absolute level of pure star power and leverage Mario had. Makes sense that as even 14 years later, Mario is still going strong and is still seen as the face of gaming. A gaming godfather, if you will. It also wasn't helpful that by this point, Squaresoft was in a pretty tough spot financially, due to several of their risky investments not turning the profit they hoped for, alongside the floundering of their film subsidiary, Square Pictures. The only reason they were even afloat at the moment was due to Sony buying 20% of their stock in order to bail them out on the grounds that several exclusives would be on PlayStation-only consoles for the next many years to come. So if you ever wondered why so many Final Fantasy games were on PlayStation, that was why. And true, they did have their hits during this time like Final Fantasy X, it just wasn't enough. And that was why they needed their own Mario 64 to get them out of this financial rut. But as they continued discussing the topic, they ended up reaching the inevitable conclusion that the only thing that could match Mario in pure popularity was a Disney character. However, while this talk was going on, they didn't know that someone was overhearing their discussion. That man was none other than the legendary Tetsuya Nomura, who grew interested and volunteered himself to lead this project if they could get it off the ground. So naturally, after forming this little team, the next step would be pitching the idea to Disney. So when you hear this, you assume they set up some sort of big important meeting to get their attention. Maybe they had like giant signs or something, or they were just going like, "Notice me, senpai." God, I fucking hate that I said that. But if you thought that would be anything, actually you'd be wrong. And that leads to the funniest aspect of this whole thing. That the pitch for Kingdom Hearts was able to happen solely because Hashimoto and an executive from Disney happened to share an elevator one day. So a pretty interesting but usually forgotten aspect of Square Enix's history is that the Japanese branch of the Disney company at one point shared a building with Square, which allowed Hachi himself to pitch the concept to the exec with much more ease, which they definitely took advantage of. So it was here Hashimoto pitched the concept of them working together, the executive liked the idea and agreed to greenlight the project, and thus the development would begin on one of the most popular game franchises of all time. But what exactly was this development like? Welp, that's what we're about to talk about next. Time to get to the development of the game. So now, they finally did it. The idea was pitched and greenlit, Nomura was at the helm, and now they could pursue their dream game. So naturally, this is the part where I drop the reveal that this game went through hell and back in order to get it out the door. But to be honest, in comparison to something like Versus 13, Kingdom Hearts never really had any major documentation of huge issues with production. It never had to change engines or systems, there weren't any crazy controversies, its development was rather tame in comparison to other games. But just because the ride was smoother than other titles, doesn't mean that the development cycle didn't have its own share of problems. For one, there was the back and forth between Disney, Square, and Nomura himself on the concept of who the main character was going to be. Now, Disney, as you might have expected, wanted one of their star characters to take the lead, their choice being Donald Duck, while Square wanted to have Mickey Mouse be the lead instead. However, Nomura wanted the main character to be a completely original one. When asked about this in an interview, he had this to say. The three sides didn't see eye to eye on everything, of course. Square wanted to make a game starring Mickey Mouse, and Disney wanted to make a Donald Duck title. Meanwhile, I wanted neither. So I built a project plan for Kingdom Hearts and began negotiating with both sides. That plan was largely what you see now. A game featuring lots of characters without focusing on any particular one. So, with the idea to please both sides in mind, Nomura went to work on designing a character all three sides would love, and after some thought, came up with the concept design for Sora. And as you can see from this picture here, it looks vastly different to what we would get as a final design. Not only was he originally, not a human boy and more a humanoid lion, but the most eye-catching part of the whole beta design was the weapon he had. Instead of him wielding his iconic Keyblade, he was using a strange chainsaw sword instead. And when he pitched this to the Disney execs, as you can probably guess, they weren't exactly fans of it, especially the sword. Everyone had this scrunched up look on their face, accompanied by dead silence as my man Nomura put it. So we went back to the drawing board, and decided to change the weapon to more of a key-like shape, as he originally planned to have keys be a major part of the narrative for the game. After this change, along with a few more tweaks and overhauls to the design, our golden boy was born. He submitted the design, it was greenlit, and thus, one of the most recognizable characters in gaming history was born. Of course, Sora's design wasn't the only thing in development to go through some changes, as the story itself also went through a massive change as well. Originally, the idea was just going to be far more simple than the one we ended up getting. A basic story of the hero saving the damsel in distress from a villain to appeal to Disney's target age range. However, after hearing about this, the now executive producer, Hibanori Sakaguchi, told him the game would be an absolute failure if he didn't aim for the same level of storytelling as the Final Fantasy series did, since he was certain many Final Fantasy fans would be playing for the crossover aspect. So Nomura took that advice for the better. Or for worse if, you ask certain people online in the year of our Lord 2024. This change to a more deeper narrative may have also been one of the reasons the series got its name in the first place, as Nomura got the idea for the name from the newest Disney theme park attraction, Animal Kingdom, but was unable to secure the IP for just the word Kingdom. As development went on and the concept of Hearts becoming a story focal point, they decided to merge the two ideas together to create the name Kingdom Hearts. Pretty interesting, I'm not gonna lie. But what about one of the most iconic parts of Kingdom Hearts? Its worlds. Going into this part of the video, I assumed this was the part where Nomura would get locked down the hardest. where my boy Tetsuya would have to fight tooth and nail to get through to Disney due to their notoriously strict copyright nature. Hell, the only reason Sora got approved as the main character of the series was that Disney got the rights to all the original creations in the game. But surprisingly enough, probably the most surprising aspect about this whole thing was that Disney, or to be more specific, the current president of the company, Bob Iger, placed little to no restrictions on what they could use. So Nomura's team had basically free reign to pick whatever they wanted for the game. So while they didn't go crazy and overload themselves with choices, they came up with a couple of rules for the worlds. 1. Every world chosen for the game must be distinctly different from the last to avoid repetition, which gives explanation as to why you go from worlds like Traverse Town to Wonderland to Tarzan. And 2. The world's story and characters needed to be interesting enough to add to the game. With those guidelines set, they then focused on finding their final piece of the puzzle, and that, who was going to compose the soundtrack for this game. And the one they decided on was the soon-to-be legendary Yoko Shimomura, who was working with Square at the time of this title, and had already obtained some notoriety after composing for games like Street Fighter II and Super Mario RPG, but rose to worldwide fame after she created the score for Kingdom Hearts. And it's incredibly easy to see why. Not only is her soundtrack considered one of the best parts of the game, and was, when this game was made, ranked as one of the best tracks of all time, but it's honestly hard to imagine so many of the scenes from Kingdom Hearts without her music hitting as much as they did. Sora's self-sacrifice at Hollow Bastion to save Kairi, to their final goodbyes in the finale, and not to mention all of the amazing battle themes, Yoko is just as much the series' lifeblood as Nomura is. It's no wonder she considers the track to be so special to her before she left Square to become a freelancer, where she went on to compose for the Mario and Luigi series, and even the newly released Reynada's title. She would also return to compose for all of the other games in the franchise, possibly due to a contract, or maybe she just likes the games that much. With that said, that's pretty much every aspect I have found about development. But instead of just wrapping it up here, I want to take a second to talk about what was cut from the game. Mainly because I admittedly want to chat about all the cool stuff I found. Now, as you can probably guess, that, like with every video game, stuff was removed for the sake of things like time and no longer having a place within the story. Most of the time it's saved for a DLC or a sequel. And most of these removed ideas did appear in later titles in some way, shape, or form. One of these were the two scrapped areas of the first game, Pride Lands and Disney Castle. Pride Lands was cut due to the technical restrictions of the engine they were working with, as Sora was supposed to become a lion in that world to blend in, but the tech they were working with isn't exactly able to handle something like that without some overhauls that would take way too long to add in. So it was left on the chopping block until 2 came about. Disney Castle, however, doesn't seem to have a clear-cut answer for why it was taken out. My guess is that it was probably due to their contract, as they probably planned to have Sora interact with Mickey there, but since they were really not able to get Mickey for more than like one scene in the original game, it was kept for the sequel where they used Minnie instead. There was also a third area called the Crumbling Islands that, according to some sources, was apparently going to be used in the final battle for Sora and Riku's fight before battling Ansem. It's this, combined with a lot of the beta footage I've seen, probably means that Riku was originally meant to be more of a villain in a lot of the original concepts and promotional material of the game, hinting that he was going to be an antagonist of his own free will instead of the controlled manipulated puppet that we got in the first game. But I guess since the story changed to having Riku fade away at Hollow Bastion regretting his actions, they decided it wasn't necessary. But I guess they were kind of attached to this area because, fun fact, they actually used it as a basis for where you one-on-one the Darkseid and Ansem in the final boss fights. There was also some concept art that revealed that Toy Story was originally an idea for the first game, but I'm guessing got scrapped early because there's no in-game engine use of it, and they only have a picture of it as a concept art. Of course, worlds weren't the only thing that were cut from the game. Several cutscenes featuring Riku were no longer in the game, like him on Big Ben, and a few moments from the Destiny Islands, Sora running from, I'm guessing, a Heartless in Traverse Town, and even Donald and Goofy's designs were gone and replaced with different attire. Lots of interesting stuff. Then there was the content remaining to gameplay, like the infamous removal of the Bahamut summon, which some people have found out how to add into the game through cheats. Cutting out the Assault Rider Heartless and leaving him for Kingdom Hearts 2, not giving Sora a loincloth for the Tarzan world. Yes, he originally was going to have that. But the most surprising of all was apparently there was also cut content for the Final Fantasy favorite, Tifa Lockhart, as well. She apparently was going to feature more prominently in the storyline of Cloud and Sephiroth, alongside being an unlockable boss fight in the Colosseum. All concepts that I assume you picked up from her now, all appear in Kingdom Hearts 2 in some way, shape, or form. She wasn't the only scrapped Final Fantasy character though, as a few others were apparently supposed to be there as well. Some confirmed, some not so much. One confirmed case was that Yuffie was originally going to be Riku from Final Fantasy X, but Nomura thought it would be confusing to have two characters named Riku running around, so he picked the ninja instead. It was rumored that Anna Brea from Parasite Eve was originally supposed to fill in Aerith's role, but take that one with a grain of salt. There was also some more minor stuff like magic layouts looking different. The Fat Bandits were originally going to have different animations and even be able to jump in the overworld. And the fact that there was originally a completely different logo than the one we got in the end makes me kind of curious to see what would have happened if these never got changed. What kind of game would it have been? Would it have been better? Worse? Who can really say? I sure can't, even if I wished I could. I can only tell you these things. With all of this said, that's all I really have been able to find about its development. So with all that out of there, it's time to wrap this up. Well, we're finally at the end of the video. With all this research done, there really isn't much left to talk about now. It finished development, shipped, sold millions of copies, and became an icon of the gaming industry, with many people, myself included, falling only more and more in love with each release of this game series that came out. And with there being talks of the series coming closer and closer to an end, it felt genuinely nice to go back to the humble beginnings of the series I love so much, and chat about how it all came to be. With that said, that's all, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm really enjoying working on these video essays alongside all of my other content, and I hope you guys like them as well. I'm going to attempt to get them out at least once a month or so. So if you want to follow along for that and all of my other content, go ahead and like and sub down below. Ring the bell for some notification goodness. That's all I gotta say. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.